Okay. So some of you have also seen these slides because I've used them in other programs. I've used them in classes, so forth. So uh, maybe you can, while you're going along, you can think about, punching some holes in the slides or some questions that you have, and hopefully we'll have time. We have to power through this because I think I have until 5, right? Is that right, Tracy or Crystal? Yeah. Okay. Good. So a couple last things about the elevator pitches. What I like to see in presentations, like an investor pitch, is that the first sentence out of your mouth, maybe after "hi, my name is your elevator pitch," and it's no more than 30 seconds. And it's called an elevator pitch because it's supposed to be the time it takes you to go up a fictitious elevator with somebody that might be willing to invest in your business if you impress them with it. So make it short and make sure that it's patently obvious what the problem you're solving is, right? And so the only way you can be sure is to try the elevator pitch out on a bunch of other people and then ask them, what problem am I solving? And if they can't state it back to you based on that first elevator pitch, then you're not doing a good job. The other thing is, it should be clear somewhat in that elevator pitch how you make money. So in the car-to-go pitch, they say per minute rental. So per minute rental is their business model, and that's how they make money. And then the last thing is they mentioned competitors, and the reason that that's important is that it places you clearly in a market that people are familiar with. And it could be that you're inventing a whole new market, right? And that's hard to do. So in that case, you might say you're kind of like something like that. But so those are the three really key elements of the elevator pitch. The other thing, so now the elevator pitch is all about framing the value proposition, right? Like, we're providing this incredible value for this very key customer segment that is chomping at the bit to do a transaction with us. That's what that is. They're exchanging the value for value, right? And now we're going to flip it around and we're going to talk about how that actually works, because the judges in this competition are going to want to know, just like investors want to know, the nitty-gritty details. Once you get beyond the elevator pitch, beyond the 10-slide deck, they're going to want to dig down into the unit economics. Now, a preamble, like, we're not asking you to write a complete business plan. We're not asking you to do fully fleshed out 5-year financial models with income statement and cash flows and balance sheets and so forth. We don't need that at this stage, because we don't even know if you should be a business yet. So, but what we do need to know is that you have the ability to create an excess. So that's what a business is, right? You spend money, goes out the door, money comes in, and you net those two things out, and there's some left over. There's some excess, which you could reinvest in the business. You can give it to the shareholders. You can increase the salaries of the people working in the company. You can donate it to the cause. There's a whole number of things that you can do with that excess. But if you can't create an excess, then you don't really have a sustainable model, whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit and so forth. So these key metrics are all about demonstrating that you have a business model that can create an excess or a residual or a profit or whatever, a value add, whatever you want to call it. So I would propose that you can get by as a pretty far as a startup, including well into the several rounds of institutional investors, venture capitalists, just knowing everything there is to know about these 4 metrics. So the first one is single unit economics. That's the single transaction and how that works. So if I have a t-shirt and I make t-shirts for $10 and I sell them for $20, I have $10 left over. That's the one transaction. Then how much does it cost me to acquire a customer? So I have $10 left over from that formula I just gave you. And so if I have to spend $12 getting people to buy my t-shirt, you can see how that's not going to create an excess, right? So that's, I need to really understand everything about customer acquisition costs. And then if I was only selling one t-shirt and no one would ever come back to me for another t-shirt, then the lifetime value I have of that customer relationship is $20. It's actually 10. It's what's left over from, it's that excess. And if, when I compare that lifetime value to the customer acquisition cost, I find out whether there's going to be any true profit. So these are all very precise things that you need to come up with. You need to have answers to, and you need to be able to answer my brother's pesky question: how do you know? How do you know that that's the lifetime value? How do you know that that's the customer acquisition cost? And of course, the answer I'm looking for is, well, I went out and I talked to customers and they said that these facts are true. So don't believe me, believe my interviews, right? And then the last one is the backdrop. This is something that the lean startup methodology doesn't really deal with that much. The business model canvas doesn't, which is sort of surprising, is how big can this be? And that's the total addressable market. So if I'm making a t-shirt, I'm sorry, I'm torturing this t-shirt example, and there's only one person that's ever going to buy my t-shirt, that's my total addressable market is, guess what? It's $20. It's not a very good one. And so I want that market to be as big as possible. And we as potential investors also want that market to be as big as possible. So let's go through each one in a little bit more detail, and I'll try to go through some examples. And I'm cramming a couple hours into a half an hour. I'm attempting to. So I'd rather have you stop me and ask questions or interject something, if I'm going too fast. So please just yell out. Okay, so unit economics is, think about it as the revenues and expenses associated with one transaction on a per unit basis. So I've already exhausted my t-shirt example. So you see there's this waterfall, the profit in this slide, that's the excess that's left over, okay? So going back to my book deal example, for if you were here in the last workshop, is that, in this model, the excess that I have left over, what I get as the author is $2.50, right? So the book was sold for $25, and what I put in my pocket after all the other investments is $2.50. So that means that it cost me the rest of the $22.50 to make the $2.50. So that's my lifetime value. I'm sorry, that's my cost of customer acquisition, okay? So think about it that way. Another way you can look at it is, breaking down how much does it cost to make the product. There's cost of goods sold. In this case, it's $33. In my t-shirt example, it's 10. How much does it cost to market or to pay the people that run the company? If it was just me and my t-shirt company, it's not, unless I don't pay myself anything, I'm not going to keep that whole $10 as profit, right? So you have to really understand that transaction. You have to explain it to the audience. So customer acquisition cost really has to do with marketing and selling expenses. So if I place a $50 ad in that's probably not right. Let's say I place a $50,000 ad in a trade magazine, a full page ad for my product. And as a result of that, I get one customer, and I only get one, and I'm doing this for easy math on my part. And they ask, and I ask them, how did you hear about me? And they say, oh, from that ad in the trade magazine. Then I know, good, I got one customer, and that customer acquisition cost was $50,000, right? So the formula is divide all of the predicted or proposed selling and administrative costs and delivery costs by the number of customers you think you're going to have. And that's your customer acquisition cost. Now, in the beginning, you're not going to know what the numerator and the denominator are. So you really need to just guess. and then test it out in the real world, right? So you can go and look at all the different marketing channels and how much it costs, right? You could Google this right now and find out the customer acquisition cost by channel, right? If you're going to do email marketing, or you're going to do Google ads, or you're going to do Facebook advertising, or you're going to do print advertising, you're going to do radio, whatever, traditional media. So you can come up with a benchmark for roughly how much does it cost to acquire customers from each of those channels, and that becomes your numerator. And then you make a prediction of how many customers you're going to get from that. I encourage you to actually look up some of that data. And if you're going to say, well, we're primarily going to use social media as a marketing channel, then what is that going to cost you? And you add in everything. So all of the creative work you do, if you pay someone to design graphics or something like that, and any promotional expenditure like media buys and so forth, that all goes into the numerator. And you could even test out some of these channels pretty cheaply if you wanted to. Okay, so then lifetime value is how much you expect to get out of the customer. I'm so annoyed because this reverted to an earlier version, and this is wrong actually, but I'll tell you why in a second. So it says the average revenue a single customer generates over the lifetime, but it's actually not the average revenue. It should be the average gross margin. So it should be the kind of gross profit that's generated off of each customer over the lifetime of that customer. So if I'm selling a car, if I'm a used car dealership, I'm selling a car, I'm probably going to have not counting on that customer coming back. That's why it's such a horrible experience. And they're just going to get that whatever profit they make off that car, selling me that car. And that's going to be the lifetime value. If it's a subscription, like a Netflix subscription, on the other hand, they have a recurring revenue. Every month, I'm going to pay more and more and more. And, if I pay $10 a month, some portion of that $10 is their gross profit. And if you could calculate how long I'm going to stay with Netflix, you could figure out the lifetime value. And in that case, that's very important, because if you know that I'm going to stay, if Netflix knows that the average person stays with them for a year or more, I'm sure it's far more than that, then they can think about their customer acquisition cost relative to that expected value. I hope that makes sense to you. So it would be the same with say insurance, like buying car insurance or buying life insurance. Those big ticket items, they tend to have very high switching costs, and that works to the advantage of the company, because they know that you're going to stay with them. If you're going to get Geico insurance on your car, you're probably not going to switch when the contract is up. And so if you paid them $1,000 for the year, they probably count on you, like 80% of the customers are going to renew for the second year. And so they can add that to the lifetime value. They can add another $800 of lifetime value. And now they have $1,800 of expected revenue to work with on average. So that's going to determine how much they can spend on that Super Bowl ad to get you to buy into Geico. So this is a Netflix example. I think I have one. Oh, no, I don't. I thought I had a Netflix example, but just doing the math for you. Okay, so the magic here is comparing lifetime value to customer acquisition cost. And nobody ever said that you could make money by buying high and selling low, right? Business is very simple. It's buying low and selling high, and there's something left over. And that's it. It would be easy for everyone if that was if it wasn't more complicated, right? But that's it. That's the MBA right there. You're all, I grant you all MBAs. You just learned the whole lesson of 2 years of business school is buy low, sell high. So the formula for the buy low, sell high is comparing customer acquisition cost to lifetime value, right? If it costs you more, if it costs me $12 to make $10 of profit on my t-shirts, There's no way I'm going to make more money or make profit by selling more t-shirts. I hope you'll agree. Unless I can make that $12 go down, or I can make that $10 go up. So if they're the same, you know, if it costs me $10 to make $10, that's also bad. I'm a nonprofit. I'm a not-for-profit, frankly. There's no excess for me. So I better be happy with that model, because I'm not leaving anything else on the table. I'm not paying for college with that business model. And then the gold standard is buying low, selling high, right? It's pretty simple. Okay, so you need to know your profit per X. You need to know your single unit economics, all right? There's a number of models for unit economics depending on the business you're in. And I'm feeling pressured for time now. But say you have physical products, they're like the t-shirt example, right? You could have a digital venture. You could be making money on advertising, if it's a portal website, or you know, a social media platform, or a subscription software as a service, a subscription like Netflix. There's a number of different business models, and I would encourage you to explore the different business models that are out there. I think it's unlikely that you're inventing a new business model altogether, something that's never been done before. In fact, I slightly discourage that, because you know, there's only so many ways of making money, I think. There's plenty of ways of marketing and different markets to go after, and there might be new innovations in that. But the business model probably is pretty straightforward. It probably fits into one that already exists, and you want to make sure that you're clear with your presentation what your business model is, right? And sometimes it's a bunch of things. Sometimes like, oh yeah, we're going to sell a product, but we're also going to sell a service. We're going to sell subscription. We're going to do consulting. We're going to have advertising on our site. So we're going to have revenue coming from a bunch of different sources. And that may be true, but in all likelihood, the overwhelming majority is going to come from one source. This is that life's 80-20 rule, right? So focus on the one where most of the revenue is coming from. And I don't think it's a good idea for you to present a business where there's a number of different ways you make money, and you sort of say, hey, we don't actually know which is going to work, but we have so many business models that something must work, right? That's not very confidence building. So in physical products, you know, the key metrics to focus on, the levers, if you will, are, you know, how of your selling price, justifying your selling price by talking to customers and showing and bringing back proof of what they're willing to pay. That's going to benchmark that part of the formula, right? And then talking to manufacturing partners about COGS is going to validate how much it's going to cost you to make the physical product. And then you're going to know your hypothetical gross margin. Presumably, as you sell more product, you're going to be able to get the cost of manufacturing that product down because of economies of scale, because of order quantities. That's usually the way it works. So we'll believe you if you tell us that your margin in the first year is going to be lower than your margin in the fifth year because your volume is going to go up. We'll believe that, but you still need to know what the what the benchmarks are. So think about different ways that you can, different levers that you can push. This is a picture of Archimedes. Archimedes discovered leverage, and I think he said, if you find me a long enough lever and a place to stand, I could move the world. That's why that picture's there. And you know, your leverage in a product model is things like, can you sell warranties? Can you upsell on accessories? Can you make the product go obsolete so that they have to buy another one from you, right? Those are all different, you know, can you get economies of scale as the business grows? So these are all different levers that you have. But typically in a physical product company, your lifetime value is your gross profit, and your cost of customer acquisition is everything else before your net profit. So in this case, you know, this is a favorable ratio, right? I'm bringing in $10 and it's costing me $7.50 to bring in $10. So that's leaving $2.50 in profit. Okay. Oh, there it is right there. So digital venture, key metrics to focus on are things like cost per click or cost per million impression, cost per 1,000 impressions. That's assuming that you're doing some sort of advertising model. I'm not wild about those models because, you know, advertising models require a lot of evidence that you're going to get a lot of people coming to your site. I mean, I can't tell you in the 10 years that I was with Coinstar, I can't tell you how many people proposed us selling advertising on the side of our machines. And the pitch was, you know, you have a machine sitting in the front of the grocery store facing the entrance, 100 million people a week walk by there, and you know, it's a perfect place for advertising. And the thing is that 100 million people walk by the machine, but they didn't see it. That's why we made those Coinstar machines so noisy, so that people would notice the machine. And so we couldn't really count the 100 million as legitimate impressions. We could only count 14, which were the people 14 people a day on average that stood in front of the machine. And there was no advertising model that works when only 14 people see your ad on a daily basis, I promise you. So, you know, it takes a huge number, thousands, millions of people to make an advertising model work. And, you know, most of us are thinking about too small markets or niche markets that aren't going to really hold up that well. So anyway, now that I've discredited this business model, there are a number of things you can do as far as leverage. So, you know, this is all about thinking about cost of customer acquisitions. How much you're gonna have to pay to place that, you know, to pay to get people to click through to your site, to get them to register for your site, to get them to sign up or buy, to get them to resubscribe, or to get them to refer a friend. There's plenty of metrics that you can use to manage that whole funnel in a digital venture. And I encourage you to know those well. If you have a digital venture that is anything like this, Google, not right now, but before the semifinals, Google Dave McClure or 500 Startups Pirate Metrics. Okay, there's 5 pirate metrics, AAARR, that's why it's pirate metrics. I can't remember what they are. It's like activation. Just Google it, look it up, and know them well, and explain that to the judges. They'll be very impressed. Okay, so subscription as a service is another model. You know, I kind of bored you to death with the Netflix example. So here's a even more detailed dive on that. So I did this analysis on looking at Netflix public filings as a, you know, their quarterly filings a couple of years ago. So their hypothetical lifetime value is about $500, and their cost of customer acquisition, which includes any marketing that they do to get you to sign up. It includes the cost of the free month. I think they do a free month trial. It includes the cost of acquiring all the movies, believe it or not. Works out to be about $70 per person. So if you think about it, if they're charging $10 a month, that's not quite what they charge, but, and then they know that they're gonna lose money on you for the first 6 months. So they're not even gonna break even until they can get you hooked for at least 7 months. So they have to be sticky. They have to make sure that there's enough of content and new things for you to watch so that you don't bail after 7 months. I've had my account now for like 15 years. So they've certainly gotten me. And in this case, what you measure in subscription as a service is churn rate. That's all you care about. That's the relationship between new customers to old customers. Okay, so the last thing, I think I'm gonna make it, is total addressable market, since I've already described it. So first, I think this is D-Day. You know, so in war, I guess, you know, you attack, you invade, you establish a beachhead. once you get there. That's what this is, the beachhead. And then you shore it up and then you expand from there. So this is the end of my war analogy. So your beachhead market is your best customers. So the ones that are so in love with you that they're, when they hear about your alpha product, even as crappy as it is, they still want to buy it. Okay, so when GM launched the EV1, the first electric vehicle, they leased it out to a few thousand people, and then they recalled it. They didn't want to launch it anymore because they thought they couldn't make any money. This is a long time ago. It was a great car. People did not want to give it back. There are some leaseholders who refused. This is a true story. You can look it up. Some of them hid the cars and refused it. It's a lease. It's not their car. It's GM's car. They hid the cars. They refused to give it back. Those are your best customers. That's who you want to find now, because they're going to be your product champions. GM just didn't listen to those customers. So business is hard, and there's a lot of choices that customers can make. And so you're trying to get those crazy EV leaseholders, because they're the ones that are going to tell everybody else about your product. And that's going to make your customer acquisition cost go down. Because if your customers tell other customers, you have a viral growth strategy and you don't have to spend any money on that, right? Okay, so it's very difficult to jump from those best customers to the place where you're really going to have a growth business because of this bell curve phenomenon. And I realize I'm going really fast here, but knowing everything about your best customers is sorry, I'm using this word a lot, is the best way to get across this chasm. And I think it's also very compelling it's almost like it's the reason why companies use testimonials all the time. So testimonials with customers saying, hey, this is the best thing I've ever seen. I'm going to use this for the rest of my life. I'm going to encourage everyone in my family to use this, right? That's why they use testimonials, because that's evidence of jumping across this chasm. To somebody like me, who's a kind of a late adopter of almost everything, it takes a lot to get me to try new things, and I'll finally do it after everyone else is doing it. And so in order to get into the mainstream market, you really have to have product champions in your customers. So you move from the best customers in the bullseye out to the overall market. Don't start with the overall market and move down. That strategy is too expensive. So you know that there's people out there that want your product or service, but if you don't know where they are, then you don't really have a beachhead yet, right? So if they're all clustered together in the same geographic location, or they all have the same habits, or they're all on the same Facebook group, I don't know, I don't use social media, then you know how to reach them, right? But if they're just spread all over the place, it's going to be too expensive, because you're going to have to rely on a Super Bowl ad. So churn rate and customer retention is important, and this chart shows why. So in the green case, basically what you have is a steady drop off, an even drop off, so of customers over time. And in the other case, you have a big drop off, but then it levels out, because so about half of your customers are staying with you for almost forever, it looks like. And that's the difference between a company that has product market fit and a company that doesn't, because the green company has to keep spending money to get new customers, but the blue company doesn't. So that you would expect their ratio of customer acquisition cost to lifetime value to be much, much, much more favorable. Okay, this is stuff I said before. So your total addressable market is your best customers times how much you're going to charge them. That's it. It's easy math. I'm going to jump through to this slide. So we want to know how many people are in the bullseye in your best customer segment. And then you're going to take those other three metrics, unit economics, times the number of people, count the sheep in that, count the noses in that circle, And that's your total addressable market. And if you're going to start launching your business in Hawaii, your total addressable market isn't the global market, right? It's not the US market for t-shirts. It's got to be something that one of the, what is it? I forget what I'm trying to say. So you're not going to be multiplying by the population of the United States. You're not even going to be multiplying by the population of Hawaii. You're going to be multiplying by the number of people who fit the customer profile that I've proven is my best customer. And I'm going to start there. And I'm going to grow from there. And that's going to be the absolutely most efficient startup marketing model that you can fit. And it's going to be the best ratio of lifetime value to customer acquisition. So think about your strategy that way. And we're also graced with two executives here today. So first we have Kyle Shelley. He's the first vice president at ASB, and he leads a small team that manages a diverse mix of commercial banking relationships, ranging from local INA businesses to large national corporations. So he's born and raised in Guam. He started his career in California as an M&A analyst. I'd love to talk to you about that someday. I spent a lot of time in M&A too. And he moved to Hawaii in 2010 to work for Bank of Hawaii before joining ASB 2 years later. So he has a certificate in executive leadership from the Michael G. Foster School of Business, University of Washington, Northwest, and also is a graduate of UW's Pacific Coast Banking School. So well, we have a lot in common here, not the UW part, but the Pacific Northwest part. So welcome, Kyle. And then Matthew Luga joins us also from ASB, and he joined ASB last year as vice president, and he's a commercial credit manager, and he works closely with a team of credit analysts and relationship managers to get loans structured, written up, and approved. And he's originally from Hilo, and he started his career at Bank of Hawaii, and he's a graduate of Hilo, where he got his BBA in accounting and business management, and he's also a Kamehameha Schools Kapalama alumnus. Well, so we are so lucky to have these two executives from ASB talk to you a little bit about how to finance your business.
All right. Well, I'm gonna proceed here, and then when it gets to Matt's slides, hopefully he can chime in. But if he can't, I can take over. So, thank you for having me, everyone. And this is how to finance your business, and we're giving you a bank perspective. And so, if we just briefly just touch on that, the bank and its business model, we take deposits from individuals like you, and we pay you so the bank perspective, just real quickly, we as an institution, we take deposits in, and we pay, of course, something very small for that. If you look at your savings account, the bank's not really going to pay you much, and we take those dollars and we lend it out, to other businesses or individuals, on their residential mortgage or a home equity line, or a loan for their business. And obviously we're going to earn more in interest on the loan than what we would pay you as a depositor in your savings account. And that's how, the bank makes money. Of course, some loans go bad. And so we're in really the risk management business of making sure that as we lend money out, we're doing it prudently and in a safe manner. And that's because we're taking in public deposits and we're regulated by, those agencies. And so we have to have prudent practice. So, big picture, the bank is not necessarily in the business of venture funding. And that's why. So the bio, was read by Peter. So I'll kind of skip over that and I'll do a quick check. If Matt, are you able to chime in on your sound or? Nope, not yet. Okay, well, Matt, he's been at there, 8 years of years in financial services. And I'll just move on to the next slide. Okay, so by the end of the class, this is what we hope to accomplish. The 5 C's of credit, that's really how the bank will evaluate your business. And if you're credit worthy for a loan, how to finance your assets. There's a matchmaking, kind of slide that we have that I think will make it easier for you guys to understand. Your cash conversion cycle, this is very important. You know, how long does it really take you to convert a sale, right, into actual cash that you have in the bank? And so knowing that is important, and there's different things about that cycle that may give you advantages of financing. Sources of capital, you know, there's really two: equity and debt. So on the equity side, angel investing or venture capital, you know, friends and family is usually a big startup capital source. Then there's the debt. You can have loans from a bank, you know, a mezzanine financer. That is basically non-banking loans, just to keep it simple. And then friends and family, they can also lend you money. Then there's traditional bank loans. So there's a Small Business Administration. HEDCO is an agency here in Hawaii that does real estate loans and other small business loans. C&I, that's just short for commercial and industrial. And then credit scored loans, right? When you walk into a bank and you apply for a personal loan, they're going to run your credit score. We also do that for business loans. So that's a very important metric for, I think, everyone here to understand early, you know, in their career of either wanting to start a business and want to seek funding. Alternative lending. So there's other, you know, sources out there. There's definitely a lot of online financial services that have, you know, blossomed and boomed, you know, over the past decade or so. These are just some names on there that you can kind of Google and search for yourself. I'm not that familiar with these, but I know that these exist. And then there's other sources of funding. Crowdfunding is another method that I know is out there. Okay. And please feel free to ask any questions. What happened to the slide? Okay, there we go. Feel free to ask any questions along the way, and let me see, post it into the chat, and I can do my best to try and answer them.
Appreciate it. Okay, so 5 C's of credit. These are, I guess, 5 general characteristics that lenders or banks use when trying to assess whether or not we should issue a loan or not to businesses. And so let's kind of go down this list here. That the first, and I would say probably the most important C of credit, is character. You know what? Lenders typically want to know that business owners are, you know, honest and they have integrity. We also want to be sure that, you know, our business owners have the background, the industry knowledge, experience, and track record that's essentially required to successfully operate a business. You know, digging a little deeper and getting a little granular, one of the ways that lenders will examine the character of a borrower is essentially doing a credit check on the business owners. So that being said, you know, it's really important that you guys as business owners now or potential business owners, you maintain, you know, good credit. You know, by reading a credit report, it essentially tells you a lot about, or it can tell you a lot about an individual. You know, whether they have a lot of delinquencies or charge-offs, those tend to be kind of a red flag for lenders. So not saying it's a deal breaker, but it's something that's not ideal. And if you do have that, just be prepared to, you know, speak upon it. Let's see here. I guess the next C that we'll cover is, any questions on that from anybody? Character, pretty straightforward. Most important C. Okay. The next C we're going to be covering now is capacity. And essentially what this is a business's cash flow available to service its debt obligations. Obviously, as a bank, as Kyle alluded to, we're responsible with our customers' deposits. So when a bank does issue a loan, we want to make sure that the loan is essentially repaid. And in looking at a business, you know, there should be sufficient cash flow being generated by the business to essentially support, you know, the business's operations, as well as its debts on a comfortable, you know, with margin. So if you look here on the slide, there is essentially, I guess, 2 ratios or metrics that banks tend to look at when evaluating the capacity of a business. The first is EBITDA over debt service, and the second is debt to EBITDA. And so briefly, what EBITDA stands for is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And really what that is kind of make it simple, is it's a simple and kind of easy metric that banks use as a cash flow proxy. Okay. So speaking to that, EBITDA to debt service, it's a ratio essentially that banks look at to see how much cash flow is being generated by the business to service its business debts. And with this ratio here, the higher the metric, the stronger the borrower or the business. Okay. The second ratio we're looking at here is, it's a little less common, but it is used. It's debt to EBITDA, and that's funded debt. It's to be a little clearer. And essentially, what this ratio shows is how many years it would take a company to pay back its debt if the company's debt and EBITDA remain constant. And with this metric here, the lower the ratio, the better the ratio. Any questions on kind of capacity? General questions?
Crystal had a question on what's a charge-off?
Oh, is that with character? Is that about character? Yeah. So that is typically when, obviously, you're not able to, make all of the payments that you originally agreed to, right? You're unable to make the bank whole and make all your payments, and the bank has really no way to recover the funds that it lent to you originally. So that's what a charge-off is. The bank writes it off as a loss. Yeah. So not ideal. Is that it? Okay, got it. So the next C is capital. Okay, so one of the things typically when you apply for a loan as a business owner, a lender will probably ask you what type of personal investment or equity contribution you as a business owner plan to contribute to the business or the purchase of an asset. And really what this helps to show is that by contributing personal assets, you're indicating that you're willing to take on some form of personal risk yourself, right? By investing into your business. You're showing that you have skin in the game, I guess, so to speak. So that's really, that's important from a lender's perspective, right? We should be business partners in these type of ventures. The next C, if there's no questions, is collateral. And so, a lender oftentimes, we talked about capacity, which is cash flow. That's going to be the primary source of repayment the bank's going to look at to get their loan repaid. But lenders also assess a secondary source of repayment, and that's where collateral comes in. And so lenders will evaluate business assets as well as personal assets of guarantors as a secondary source of repayment. And, collateral is an important consideration when lenders make loans, but its significance can vary depending on the type of loan that is being requested. Questions? No? Okay.
Well, what about intangible collateral? We do make loans that aren't necessarily secured by a hard, real asset that you can touch, like a tangible asset, but maybe you can just comment briefly on intangible assets.
Yeah. So I guess if the secondary source of repayment, if we're looking at assets like intangible assets, isn't really available for the bank to use it as a source of repayment in say a scenario where you can't make payments. Really, the mitigant to that would essentially be how strong is your capacity, from a cash flow perspective of your business. And then the bank would also look to the character of the owner and as well as their capacity as a guarantor. And, a guarantor essentially, again, it's a third party who guarantees to repay the loan in full if for whatever reason the borrower is unable to fulfill their payment obligation. Sorry, Kyle, is that what you were kind of alluding to? Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. And then the final C is condition. And so this is really important for lenders, right? We're going to want to understand the conditions of not only your business trends. We're going to want to understand the industry as well as the overall economy. We're going to want to know if operations are expected to stay relatively stable. Are you on an uptrend? Is your business or industry in decline? These are some of the important macroeconomic considerations that we look at as well in our underwriting and lending. Another add-on to the conditions as well is, the lender is going to want to know what the loan proceeds are going to be used for, and making sure that the type of loan that we lend to our borrowers appropriately matches what the use of the funds are. And I believe that's going to be covered in another slide down the line. And any questions? Sorry, I know it's kind of a lot in a small slide. No questions? If not, we can move to the next slide. Okay. So this is a nice little slide. Basic Accounting 101. I'm sure you guys have all heard it before, right? Assets equals liabilities plus owner's equity. And in the case of this discussion here, what it's really telling you is that there are two essential ways to finance your assets. One alternative is through owner's equity. And this is through maybe personal cash that you have as a business owner that you're going to put in to acquire those assets. It could be, taking money from family, friends, maybe a third-party institutional investor or venture capital company. So that's one alternative as far as, obtaining money to purchase assets. And on the flip side, there's liabilities, which is, standard bank financing we're talking about here today. Term loans, revolvers, leases. You can also take out, debt from family and friends, right? Rather than issue them equity, you take debt instead. There's mezzanine financing on there, which is essentially a hybrid between debt and equity financing. It would give the lender the right to convert their debt to equity under certain circumstances. And then there's also trade payable financing, which is something is also covered in a later slide, but that's also an efficient way of kind of financing your general operations.
This slide is just to go over, bank likes to make sure that the type of financing is appropriate to the type of asset that you have. And so real quick here, trading assets, like your receivables, right? You make a sale, you haven't collected your money yet, and you need to buy inventory, or a revolving line of credit would typically finance those kinds of assets for your business. Contracts are similar. So think of like a general contractor, they have construction, right? They have a job that they need to do, right? Well, they need some working capital to maybe buy materials, hire people, those kinds of things. And a revolving line of credit, again, could be used for that. And when we say revolving line, it's, I guess think of it like a credit card. You can draw on it and, pay interest only, and then you pay it down and you can redraw, that facility. So think of it like a really large, credit card for a business. Longer contracts, right? That's, I use the PPA, so a power purchase agreement as an example here. So they say you have a PV system and you're selling power to Hawaiian Electric and you have a 20-year contract. Well, we can, give you a term loan. That's a longer duration loan. Could be 5 years or 10 years, right? So you pay that back over time. So it's matching up the revenue source and the cash flow source. And that's why we have, a different loan product here. Equipment. So same thing. I just kept it with the energy example, like the PV system, right? Well, you need to buy the PV system. So, the bank can look at providing you a term loan for that as well. And we're going to be using, economic useful life, right, of the asset as a potential determinant of how long of a loan we would give you. And that also would go hand in hand with your revenue projections, right? What's the reliability of the revenue and cash flow generation that also may dictate the term of the loan. And then you have real property assets. So just think real estate, like a house or a commercial building, something like that. And those can be very long dated, term loans. 10 years is usually the max for a commercial loan, which is different than, say, a residential mortgage, which would be like 30 years. But we allow the business to pay it over. The repayment schedule is over a 30-year amortization. So even though you may have a shorter term, the loan payments are structured such that, it basically assumes hypothetically as if you were to repay it over 30 years, and that's what that does. Okay, any questions on, on that slide? Okay. And Crystal, we have till 3:30, is that right?
5:30?
I mean, 5:30, sorry. Okay, I'll try and speed it up here. Okay, so cash conversion cycle, right? So this is, again, how long does it take you to make a sale and turn that into cash? And here's, kind of the formula there. And, so I just wanted to go over this, that some businesses that we do lend to have negative working capital relationships. So, you as an example, you sold a shoe, if you were to make shoes for $100, you revenue, right? $100, you collect on this after 5 days, and your input cost, right, is say it's $50, and you don't have to pay that to your manufacturer until 10 days. So you have a difference there of 5 days, right? So you collected the cash and you don't have to pay them back. So that becomes a source of cash for your business. And if you're growing, you can basically use that cash to basically self-finance, some of your growth. And so that's something to just kind of take away as you maybe advance in business. And if your business starts to get larger, you're really going to start to look at how quickly do you collect, and you want to collect as soon as possible. And then what are your repayment terms for your vendors that you have to pay, your suppliers and your input cost. And, sometimes there's incentives for paying early, which may, be beneficial to you. And sometimes there's not. So then, maybe you want to pay as late as possible, assuming there's no penalties. And so that's a sort of a way to have interest-free cash from your manufacturer. So was there any questions on that? Nope. Okay, so this is the last slide. And, this is really, when we think about startups, and ventures, you're really going to be borrowing money most likely from, a venture source or a family and friend. And, like Matt alluded to, sometimes getting a loan from your family and friends may be better than having them be an equity owner, because then then you're giving away equity in your business and potentially some control, if your equity were to be diluted over time. In addition, from a bank perspective, bank financing is usually a very low cost of capital. So we like to see businesses graduate to get to bank financing, because that's how you can get really low interest bearing loans. And when you think about the financial model, the lowest cost of capital, is very important to your overall, returns as a business. Even if you're a nonprofit, right, you want lowest cost of capital, in order to have, the most, I guess, profit, even though it's a nonprofit, they have to generate excess cash flow in order to survive and be sustainable. And so sometimes, I've seen business owners use their home equity line of credit as an example. There's a 1% introductory period, right? And they leverage potentially their home asset in order to finance a business venture. And that may not be a bad way to go about it. I mean, you're putting your home asset on the line, but it may be a better alternative than borrowing from, another lender or a source that may have a higher interest cost. So I've seen that. There's also factoring, other lenders that may take your invoices and lend you against what your invoices are for a certain percentage. And that's out there as well. I'll pause real quick to see if Matt wants to chime in on this slide and see what other methods there are on how business owners might have done something to kind of leverage bank products, for their business?
Not much more to add, but I will say that the home equity line of credit it's a valuable tool if you have a home available, right? Like you mentioned, Kyle. Typically low introductory rate, and even once the promo period is done, they tend to be pretty low cost of funds. And not to mention the terms as well, right? A lot of these lines are longer than a standard commercial line of credit, which is like around a 1-year maturity. A lot of these home equities are a 10, 15-year draw maturity. So in addition to be cheaper, it also provides you flexibility as well. So yeah, that's a great tool to leverage if you have that at your disposal.